Hello, welcome back, everyone. Welcome to our tea garden chat. This week, we're going to be talking about working with medicinal plants. So, I'm really delighted to be here with you because I think working with medicinal plants is one of the most exciting ways that we can nourish ourselves and actually heal ourselves with nature, right? And I put out on Instagram a few days ago, that tea is medicine, right? And what I actually want us to remember is that plants themselves are the original medicine. They're not an alternative. They're not something newfangled and new agey that we're doing. They're actually this incredibly ancient wisdom that we need to remember as a species how to work with, right? And we need to remember that, in fact, we are nature and it is coded into our DNA to be able to understand and work with plants so that we know whether they're medicinal or poisonous or how they can help us, right? So today I really want to look at, a wide range of plants. Medicinal plants is there's thousands and thousands of plants. So this is not an end all be all, talk about how you can work with any specific herb. It's really an approach and the way you want to lay the foundation for your any work that you're doing with medicinal plants, right? And one of the things we talked about last week was how to create an herbarium. And this week, what I really want to add to that is how to take your herbarium, or a new document that you create, and to start recording the materia medica of each plant. So again, we're using those Latin names and Latin terminology, but materia medica is basically meant to mean the medicinal material of the plant. So when we were recording things for our herbarium, we were looking at, the structure, the physical properties of it. We were naming it by family and species and definitely by the botanical name so we know we're working with the right plant. And we still want to do that in our materia medica, but now we want to add another layer to understanding this plant and to working with it, right? And I want to share with you a few different ways that you might want to record this information and also a few resources for you, because like I said, this is a huge topic, medicinal plants. And so there's several different ways to approach this, and you'll need to feel into what feels like the right medicine for you and what's nourishing for you right now with the plants. So basically, this concept of the materia medica still uses the botanical name of the plant, right? So we will have the common name, but we'll definitely have the botanical or the scientific name of the plant. So we'll have the family and the species, right? And the other thing that we want to start recording is how do we work with this plant, right? And it's really important that you actually start with just a few plants. Otherwise, you'll completely overwhelm yourself. So one of my dear herbal educators, Kat Meyer, always talks about how in her clinical practice for years and years and years, she only ever worked with 12 herbs as a clinical herbalist. And that is because there are so many powerful uses and combinations of plants that when you know a small number of plants more deeply, you're actually a lot more effective than just knowing maybe one or not any uses for a plant, but knowing of it and knowing a broad range of plants, right? So what we do in the Materia Medica is we record what is medicinal about this plant. We start to record for ourselves, and it really is meant to be something joyful, a repetition that feels like a coming home, like a return to that inner wisdom, like a remembering of what these plants are here to show us and teach us and help us remember and help us to heal, right? And so this repetition shouldn't feel like heavy homework and heavy lifting. It should be something that you enjoy doing, right? And that's where I want to point out that you can include a few key things, but then you can also branch off and look at things that maybe pique your interest in one path or another. So I think the thing that we want to all include on our Materia Medica is the parts of the plant that are used, right? So understanding botanically, is it the root that the medicine is found in? Is it the stem and the leaf? Is it the flower? Is it the fruit of the plant? Is it the seed, right? So there's all these different parts of the plant, and we want to know what plant is being used. And if you're new and you're kind of wading through information, one of the things you might see often is something called aerial parts, right? And that, just so you know, is all of the parts that are above ground that are essentially in the air. I like to think of it as those aerial parts, right? So if you see something that says aerial parts, that means that basically everything that the plant grows above ground, the stem, the leaf, the flower, the fruit, the seed, all of that can be used, right? Sometimes you'll see very specific instructions where, the flower is okay, but the seed is not, or the rest of the plant is not okay, but the seed is okay. So that's where, when you're looking at how you can work with this plant, we want to understand what part of the plant is being used. So that's a section that you are for sure, after the naming, the correct scientific naming of the plant, you want to include the parts used for your reference, okay, in your Materia Medica and as you're working with herbal medicines. The other thing that I think is important to consider in the ethical sense of working with plants, and you'll notice that I say constantly working with the plants rather than using them. What is it used for? I will say the parts that we use of the plant, right? But really, when we come in contact with this plant as another species, we want to be in relationship with this plant. We want to treat them with respect, right? Because then we get the ultimate medicine from them. And so we work together with the plant. And part of doing that ethically is to have an understanding that this is a relationship, and also to learn about that plant. What is its favorite habitat? Where does it like to grow? Where will it thrive? And also, what are the risk factors for that plant? So, for instance, if there is something that may be, a scent, or something you'd really like to use, like frankincense, but it's something that is absolutely not sustainable or regenerative to be working with, then you want to note that that is an at-risk plant, and you want to find a similar plant that can offer you a medicine that doesn't endanger the plant itself, right? So I think it's really important to think about the habitat and where this grows, and what risk factors are around for the plant, and do I need to find a substitute, for instance, for white sage, or something that is often used in smoke cleansing. Is there a more sustainable option than maybe some of these exotic plants? What could I use that's maybe even native to my area? This makes your Materia Medica really powerful when you start working with local and native plants as well. Okay, and the other thing you might want to include, just for fun, and I love this about plants, is some of the, sort of ethno-botanical information. What is the mythology? What is the folklore around this plant? What stories are carried on? I love this about yarrow, and, it literally is thought to be a plant of the Roman army, and that it was used on the soldiers to heal, and heal wounds and bruises and stop bleeding, right? And so we have this Achillea millefolium, and that literally comes from the time when it was thought to be used by Achilles, right? And so sometimes the name actually will tell you some of the folklore as well. But this is a really interesting thing to consider about the plant because there's a lot of power in the stories around plants as well. So I encourage you to lean into whatever stories and whatever folklore and mythology you can find around these plants as you want to grow your relationship with them. Okay, and then the other thing practically is, how is this used in medicine, right? What are we doing with this? Is this something that we recommend for a headache? Is this something we recommend for a stomach cramp, right? Like, what are the medicinal uses? And this could also relate to which body system does this herb affect, right? So certain herbs are known to affect the liver. They're known to affect soft tissues. They're known to affect the nervous system and be nervine herbs, right? So what are those medicinal uses? How are we trying to work with this plant? Okay, and part of that is to get a little bit more scientific and understand that there are a very specific list of herbal actions, right? Things that are antifungal, things that are antispasmodic, things that will help you to rid yourself of phlegm, right? So, what herbal actions does this plant have? That you want to record because it will be closely tied to how you will work with it to create a medicine from it, right? Or how it can heal and nourish. So what are the actions and what are the properties of that plant? And one of the things that you might want to know specifically is what are the constituents, right? Does it have things that, naturally kind of reduce inflammation? Does it have things that, are kind of like scrubbing, astringent properties where it can clean cells and clean organs in the body? So, what constituents are in the plant? What is the plant made of? Is it made of polyphenols? Is it made of volatile oils? What constituents are in there that are the medicine, right? What constitutes the medicine of the plant? And so we want to know both what those actual chemicals are, right? And this may be a little bit more advanced chemistry. So maybe this is a layer that you add to your Materia Medica later, right? We want to start with what is the general use, then what are the specific herbal actions of this herb, and then coming into a deeper understanding of what are the actual constituents in the plant that cause that medicine to come forward. And then the other thing that I really want to invite you to explore is the concept of energetic herbalism, right? To understand that plants are not just medicine for our physical body, but they can actually be medicine for our spirit as well. And so this really relates to the energetics of a plant, and thinking of, a common condition, especially this time of year, depression, right? This is a state of cold, damp stagnancy, right? We can just feel swamped by that depression, and we're just kind of in that shaking, quaking, quivery, feeling paralyzed, feeling kind of frozen, right? That's where some of the coldness comes in, right? And so if I was trying to work with a plant to combat this kind of state, I would want to pick a plant that energetically is not cooling and damp. I want to pick a plant that has a lot of vitality and warmth. I might be looking for something like St. John's wort or calendula, right? Something with that bright, illuminating spirit that can bring that medicine to a depressed state of mind or a depressed state of being. So the energetics of the plant are another thing that I always include in my own Materia Medica. And I encourage you, if it interests you, to dive in and explore more, because this is actually a really fascinating topic of herbalism, is to look at the energetics of the plant. And then finally, I think one thing that really needs to be also included is any sort of contraindications that you have for using this herb. You know, not to be used during pregnancy, not to be used if you are taking blood thinners, not to be used if you are, you know, on a certain medication or have high blood pressure, right? Anything where there's a situation that this herb would not benefit and could actually do harm, you want to include that in your medicine, in your Materia Medica as well. Okay, so I want to share a couple of wonderful resources for you as you start to think about creating what you will have, what information you want to reference in your Materia Medica. So as I was saying, Kat Meyer is one of my teachers, and she's also the author of this book, Energetic Herbalism. This is a phenomenal resource, especially when you are just starting out in understanding the energetics of the plant and how plants combine together when you're making tea blends and you're wanting to mix formulas and not have things that counteract each other. And another wonderful book is This Art and Practice of Spiritual Herbalism, right? So this is understanding the ancient wisdoms of plants and the spirit medicine that plants have in them as well. So those are a couple towards the energetics. I can also highly recommend Anima Mundi Herbals and Adriana Ayales. She is the founder of Anima Mundi Herbals, and she also has an amazing herbal astrology deck. And that is another layer where we look at who is the ruling planet of that plant. Is it a sun plant? Is it a moon plant? Is it from Jupiter? Is it from Mars? What energy astrologically and sort of archetypally does that plant have? So I can highly recommend the herbal astrology deck as well. And just for general reference, right, we want to basically start building up beyond our herbarium and, you know, identifying plants. We want to know ways that we can work with them. So a few references here. These have been textbooks in some of my herbal certifications. The Way of Herbs by Michael Tira. This is a phenomenal book. And if you would like to be making your own medicines, your own remedies, I also highly recommend the Herbal Medicine Maker's Handbook. This is by a man named James Green, and he's a phenomenal herbalist. And again, you want to get yourself something that's also kind of a broad reference, right? So what I like to do, and what was recommended to me when I was going through this encyclopedia is very heavy, so that's why I'm setting it down, but something like that, you know, an encyclopedia that really will cover a large number of plants. But the reason I want you to have multiple references is so that you can cross-reference, right? And that was what I was taught to do as I began working with medicinal plants, is you don't ever take your information from just one source. And that's why it's important for you to compile your own Materia Medica and your own way of recording this information so that you have it whenever you want to use it and in a way that makes sense to you. But also you can start to cross-reference, like, oh yes, this is always listed as being a cooling plant, or this is always listed as being antifungal, or this is always listed as being used in a tea versus a tincture or a flower essence or a salve or some other kind of herbal medicine that we can create, right? So looking at a number of references, and I recommend books because I feel like they can really show you a lot botanically. They're there for you to reference. They don't require you to go on a screen. And it supports the wisdom tradition of herbalism being passed down through the words that are in those books. So I really encourage you to dive into whichever aspects appeal to you most. You know, are you most wanting to know about the particular herbal actions? Are you really, a climate activist and you want to know which medicinal plants are at risk and need substitutions? This is a great thing to dedicate yourself to. Are you really interested in pregnancy and birthing and motherhood? Maybe you have, something that is calling you when it comes to these herbs. But I encourage you to lean into whatever that is and share with us your Materia Medicas as you make your discoveries and you start working with your own medicinal plants. I'd love to know what plants you are starting with, what plants you're growing, what plants are helping you and nourishing you. Share with us in the Facebook group, and I will see you next week for another Tea Garden Chat.